Welcome to Echoes of the Past, the channel where history lives, breathes, and speaks. It's raw, real, and unfiltered. These are the true stories they didn't teach you in school. If you love real storytelling, ancient warfare, African kingdoms, biblical conflicts, philosophy of power, and the lost voices of the past, you belong here. Subscribe now to Echoes of the Past, because the past isn't dead.
Africa was not a jungle. Empires, spiritual traditions.
The scramble for Africa, the carving of a continent. Before the foreign flags were planted, before the treaties written in European capitals, Africa was a vast tapestry of kingdoms, empires, and tribal nations, each with its own histories, languages, and rulers. From the powerful Ashanti Empire in West Africa, to the Zulu kingdom in the south, to the ancient Christian realms of Ethiopia, the continent was a mosaic of civilizations. Trade routes stretched across the Sahara, gold and ivory moved through bustling ports, and oral traditions carried centuries of wisdom. But as the 19th century dawned, the European gaze sharpened. Africa was no longer just a place of exploration and trade. It was becoming the greatest prize of empire. Driven by curiosity, ambition, and the promise of untold riches, European explorers pushed deeper into Africa's interior in the early 19th century. Names like Mungo Park, David Livingstone, and Henry Morton Stanley filled newspapers in London, Paris, and Brussels. They mapped rivers, documented tribes, and sent back tales of great lakes and vast forests. But exploration was never purely innocent. Every path charted, every river traced, was a potential highway for empire. And behind every explorer's journal was the quiet shadow of European governments and businessmen, hungry for new lands to claim. By the mid-19th century, Europe's factories were roaring, but the industrial beast demanded more. More raw materials, more markets, more labor. Africa's forests promised rubber and timber. Its mines glittered with gold, copper, and diamonds. The European elite began to speak not just of trade, but of ownership. Africa was to be not a partner, but a possession. The industrial age turned imperialism from a slow expansion into a race. In a room in Berlin, far from the deserts, jungles, and rivers of Africa, European powers gathered under the direction of Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. There were no African leaders present. The Berlin Conference was a polite but ruthless negotiation over a continent's fate. Lines were drawn on maps, boundaries invented with ruler-straight precision, kingdoms split apart, and rival tribes forced together. In just a few months, Africa's political geography was rewritten, not by war on African soil, but by pen strokes in European parlors. Among the most infamous chapters was King Leopold II of Belgium's personal claim over the Congo Free State. It was not a Belgian colony. It was his private property, a nation treated as a vast slave plantation. Rubber quotas were enforced with the lash. Failure often meant severed hands. Villages were burned, families destroyed, and millions perished. Under the guise of civilization and progress, the Congo became a killing field for profit. But Africa did not bow quietly. The late 19th century saw a wave of resistance wars against the new European invaders. In West Africa, Samurai Touré led his Mandinka empire in fierce battles against the French. In Sudan, the Mahdist forces defeated a British army at Khartoum. In the south, the Zulu under King Cetshwayo clashed with the British at Isandlwana, delivering one of the empire's most shocking defeats. These victories were often temporary, but they proved that Africa would not surrender without a fight. In 1879, Britain sought to dismantle the Zulu kingdom, fearing its military power and influence in southern Africa. At Isandlwana, the Zulu warriors, disciplined and fearless, smashed a British column, killing over 1,300 soldiers, one of the empire's greatest battlefield humiliations. But the British returned with overwhelming reinforcements, armed with artillery and Gatling guns. By July, King Cetshwayo's forces were crushed at Ulundi. The war became a grim symbol of the industrial age's devastating impact on traditional armies. Far to the north, in Sudan, Muhammad Ahmad declared himself the Mahdi, the prophesied redeemer of Islam, and rallied thousands to expel the Anglo-Egyptian administration. In 1885, Mahdist forces besieged Khartoum, killing General Charles Gordon and shocking Britain. For over a decade, the Mahdists controlled Sudan until the Anglo-Egyptian army, armed with Maxim guns, annihilated them at Omdurman in 1898. The slaughter marked the terrible imbalance between African courage and European firepower. In West Africa, the Ashanti Empire resisted British encroachment for decades. Skilled in diplomacy and warfare, they fought multiple wars, the last in 1900, the War of the Golden Stool. When the British governor demanded the sacred golden stool, symbol of Ashanti sovereignty, Queen Mother Ya Asantewaa led her people in revolt. Though the British ultimately prevailed, Ya Asantewaa's defiance became a rallying cry for future generations. Ethiopia stood as a rare beacon of independence. Under Emperor Menelik II, the nation faced Italian invasion in 1896. At Adwa, Ethiopian forces, tens of thousands strong and well-armed, crushed the Italians in a stunning victory. The defeat sent shockwaves through Europe and secured Ethiopia's sovereignty for decades. Adwa became a symbol across Africa that colonialism could be resisted and defeated. British imperialist Cecil Rhodes envisioned a British-controlled corridor from Cape Town to Cairo. His policies, backed by ruthless economic exploitation and military campaigns, reshaped southern Africa. The pursuit of diamonds in Kimberley and gold in the Transvaal fueled both fortune and bloodshed, laying the groundwork for the Anglo-Boer Wars. Between 1899 and 1902, Britain clashed with the Boer republics of Transvaal and the Orange Free State. Though white settlers on both sides, the war was tied to imperial control over gold and diamonds. The British introduced concentration camps for Boer civilians, a dark precedent that foreshadowed future horrors. African laborers suffered greatly, caught between two colonial powers. In German East Africa, brutal forced labor policies sparked a massive uprising in 1905. The Maji Maji rebels, believing in sacred water charms to repel bullets, attacked German outposts. The rebellion was met with scorched earth tactics, leading to famine and the deaths of over 250,000 people. It was one of the deadliest uprisings against colonial rule. In German Southwest Africa, modern Namibia, the Herero and Nama peoples resisted German land seizures in 1904. General Lothar von Trotha's orders were chilling. Extermination. Tens of thousands were driven into the desert to die of thirst and starvation. Survivors were sent to concentration camps, where medical experiments were conducted. This genocide would later be recognized as one of the first of the 20th century. From Senegal to Mali, Niger to Côte d'Ivoire, France expanded its empire through a mix of treaties, military force, and economic control. Resistance was met with swift retaliation, and colonial administration reshaped societies, enforcing French language, education systems, and legal codes that erased local governance. Through a gradual process of treaties, military campaigns, and amalgamation, Britain brought the diverse territories of Nigeria under its control by 1914. The Sokoto Caliphate was subdued, Igbo communities pacified, and vast resources tapped. The colonial economy favored British traders, while local traditions and governance were systematically weakened. When World War I erupted, Africa became another battlefield. Colonies were invaded by rival European powers, and hundreds of thousands of African soldiers and porters were conscripted. In German East Africa, General Paul von Lettow-Vorbeck waged a guerrilla campaign against Allied forces until the war's end. The war deepened colonial control, but also exposed Africans to global politics and the idea of self-determination. The period between the world wars saw rising unrest. In Libya, Omar Mukhtar led a fierce resistance against Italian forces. In Kenya, early nationalist movements stirred. Economic exploitation deepened, with cash crops replacing food crops, leading to famines and discontent. In defiance of the League of Nations, Mussolini's Italy invaded Ethiopia, seeking revenge for Adwa. Italian forces used poison gas and modern weaponry against Ethiopian defenders. Emperor Haile Selassie's appeal to the League fell on deaf ears. The conquest was a bitter reminder that the colonial appetite was far from sated. During W2, Africa was a critical theatre, from the deserts of North Africa to the jungles of Madagascar. African soldiers fought in European armies against Axis forces. The war weakened European colonial powers and ignited hopes for independence among returning veterans. The end of W2 brought a surge of nationalist movements. Leaders like Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, Jomo Kenyatta in Kenya, and Patrice Lumumba in Congo inspired masses to demand self-rule. The global wave of decolonization had reached Africa's shores. In Kenya, the Mau Mau Rebellion, 1952-1960, erupted as Kikuyu fighters took up arms against British settlers and the colonial government. The war was brutal, villages destroyed, civilians detained in camps, and thousands killed. Yet it forced Britain to confront the inevitability of Kenyan independence. In 1957, Ghana became the first sub-Saharan African nation to win independence under Kwame Nkrumah's leadership. The moment electrified the continent, proving that freedom could be achieved through political organization and popular pressure. The Belgian Congo gained independence in 1960, but chaos followed. Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba was deposed and later assassinated amid Cold War intrigue, and the country descended into violence. The scramble for Africa had ended, but the scramble for influence had begun anew. From 1954 to 1962, Algerian nationalists waged a bloody war against French rule. Urban guerrilla warfare, bombings and mass reprisals shocked France and the world. The war claimed hundreds of thousands of lives before Algeria finally broke free. Nigeria achieved independence in 1960, uniting diverse ethnic and religious groups under one flag. Yet the legacy of colonial boundaries and resource exploitation would soon ignite internal conflicts, including the Biafran War. Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya gained independence in the early 1960s, while Somalia emerged from Italian and British rule. Leaders like Julius Nyerere promoted African socialism and unity, but the scars of colonial exploitation remained. Unlike most European powers, Portugal clung to its African colonies into the 1970s. In Angola, Mozambique, and Guinea-Bissau, liberation movements fought protracted wars until the Carnation Revolution in Lisbon ended dictatorship and colonial rule. In southern Africa, white minority-ruled Rhodesia declared independence from Britain in 1965, defying global opinion. A long guerrilla war followed, leading to majority rule and the birth of Zimbabwe in 1980 under Robert Mugabe. By the late 20th century, the map of Africa had been redrawn, not by European hands, but by its own people. Yet the scars of the scramble linger: artificial borders, economic dependence, and cultural disruptions. The story of the scramble for Africa is not just one of conquest, but of survival, resistance, and rebirth. The continent remains a place where the past speaks loudly, and the future is still being written.